The sun hung low over Frontier's Hollow like a dying ember, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. Red dust swirled in the evening wind, coating everything in a fine layer of rust-colored grit. The town sat wedged between endless stretches of desert and distant mountain ranges, their peaks jagged against the fading sky like broken teeth. It was a place forgotten by God and civilization alike, where the railroad had promised to come but never did, leaving its people to scratch out their existence from the unforgiving earth. Clara Whitmore stood at her kitchen window, watching the townspeople prepare for the harvest dance. Lanterns were being strung between the posts outside the church, their warm glow already beginning to compete with the dying daylight. She could hear the faint strains of a fiddle being tuned, the laughter of women arranging tables, the excited chatter of children who rarely had cause for celebration in this desolate place. Her house stood at the edge of town, a modest wooden structure that had seen better days. The paint peeled from its boards like old skin, and the porch sagged slightly to one side. But it was the house's proximity to the cemetery that truly set it apart, close enough that on quiet nights, she could hear the wind whistling through the wooden crosses and weathered headstones. Benjamin's grave lay 30 paces from her back door. A simple marker bore his name and dates. Benjamin Whitmore, 1,851 to 1,879 inches. Nothing more. No loving husband, no devoted son, no respected citizen, just a name and numbers. Cold as the man himself had been in his final years. Clara touched her fingertips to the glass, her reflection ghost-like in the window. At 26, she was still young by any measure, but the past year had etched lines around her eyes that belonged to a much older woman. Her auburn hair, once her pride, was now always severely pinned back, hidden beneath a black widow's cap. She had made herself invisible, unremarkable, safe. The bruises had long since faded from her arms, but she still found herself rubbing the places where they had been. Benjamin had been careful about that. Never the face, never where the good people of Frontier's Hollow might see. He had been a man of reputation, after all, the son of the town's founder, heir to a small fortune that had dwindled to nothing through drink and poor decisions. A knock at her door made her start. She recognized the heavy tread even before she opened it. Mrs. Henderson from the general store, her face pinched with the peculiar mixture of pity and suspicion that Clara had grown accustomed to. "Evening, Clara," the older woman said, though her eyes were already sliding past her, taking in the sparse interior of the house. "We're setting up for the dance. Thought you might want to contribute something. Perhaps those preserved peaches you're known for?" Clara's hands tightened on the doorframe. "I'm afraid I haven't any to spare this year, Mrs. Henderson." The lie came easily. Her cellar held dozens of jars, but offering them would mean accepting the invitation implicit in the request. Would mean pretending she was still part of this community that whispered about her when her back was turned. "I see." Mrs. Henderson's mouth pursed. "You know, Clara, it's been a year now. People would understand if you began to rejoin society. There are several widowers who've asked after you. Mr. Campbell, for instance. He has that nice spread out east of town." Clara's smile felt like broken glass in her mouth. "That's very kind, but I'm not ready to think of such things. A woman alone, people talk." Mrs. Henderson leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Especially given the circumstances. That horse of Benjamin's was always steady as stone. Strange how it would throw him like that, out of nowhere." The words hung between them, heavy with accusation. Clara had heard them all before, in the general store, outside the church, wherever 2 or 3 gathered to gossip. How convenient that Benjamin had died just when his drinking had gotten worse. How fortunate that his young wife inherited what little remained of the Whitmore property. How suspicious that she'd been the only witness, finding him with his neck broken at the bottom of Skeleton Ridge. "Accidents happen," Clara said quietly, "even to experienced riders." Mrs. Henderson sniffed. "Indeed they do. Well, if you change your mind about the dance, you know where to find us." The Lord forgives all sins. Clara, remember that." After the woman left, Clara closed the door and leaned against it, her heart hammering in her chest. The Lord might forgive all sins, but the people of Frontier's Hollow had longer memories and sharper tongues. They didn't know about the nights Benjamin had come home reeking of whiskey and rage. They didn't know about the baby she'd lost after he'd pushed her down the stairs, or how he'd burned her hope chest and everything in it, her mother's wedding dress, her grandmother's quilts, every link to the life she'd had before him. They knew only that Benjamin Whitmore was dead, and his wife had been there when it happened. As darkness fell properly over the town, Clara found herself drawn outside despite her better judgment. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and walked to the edge of her property, where she could watch the festivities from a safe distance. The dance had begun in earnest now. Couples whirling in the firelight to the sound of fiddle and guitar. Children darted between the adults' legs, stealing cookies from the refreshment table while their mothers pretended not to notice. It was a scene of such ordinary joy that it made Clara's chest ache. She had once been part of such gatherings, before Benjamin had shown his true nature, before the town had drawn its conclusions about what kind of woman stayed with such a man, and what kind of woman survived him. She was so lost in her observations that she almost missed the rider approaching from the desert. At first, he was just a dark shape against the darker horizon, moving with the unhurried pace of a man who had nowhere particular to be. But as he drew closer to the circle of firelight, conversations began to falter. The fiddle squeaked to a halt mid-song. The stranger rode a black horse that looked as wild as the land itself, its coat dusty from hard travel. The rider sat easy in the saddle despite what must have been hours on the trail. His hat was pulled low, casting his face in shadow, but Clara could see the strong line of his jaw, the week's worth of stubble, the way his eyes swept the crowd with the wariness of a hunted animal. He dismounted at the edge of the gathering, his spurs singing a metallic song with each step. The firelight caught on the pair of Colts at his hips, worn with the ease of long familiarity. Everything about him spoke of danger, from the predatory grace of his movements to the way the crowd parted before him like water. "Evening," he said, his voice carrying the rasp of desert wind and little use. "Name's Jesse Kane. Looking for a place to water my horse and rest for the night." The name rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown in still water. Clara saw recognition dawn on several faces, followed quickly by fear. She didn't know the name, but she knew the look. It was the same one they gave her, magnified tenfold. This was a man with blood on his hands, real or imagined. Sheriff Watson, a portly man who'd gotten his position more through politics than prowess, stepped forward. His hand hovered near his gun, though something in Kane's stance suggested that would be a fatal mistake. "This is a peaceful town. Mr. Kane, we don't want any trouble." Kane's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Not looking to give any, just passing through. To where?" "That's my business." The two men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Kane's gaze shifted, moving over the crowd with deliberate slowness. It paused on Clara, standing alone in the shadows beyond the firelight. Their eyes met for a moment that stretched like taffy, and she felt something electric pass between them, recognition, perhaps, though not of faces. It was the recognition of one outcast to another, one soul marked by violence to its kindred. He touched the brim of his hat to her, a gesture so subtle that no one else noticed. Then he turned back to the sheriff. "I'll be at Murphy's boarding house if you need me, though I'd prefer to be left alone." He led his horse away, leaving behind a crowd buzzing with nervous energy. Clara heard the whispers starting already. Jesse Kane, the gunslinger who'd killed 3 men in Tucson. Or was it 5 in Amarillo? The stories varied, but they all agreed on one point. He was dangerous. A man with a price on his head and the devil at his heels. Clara slipped back to her house, but found herself unable to settle. She stood again at her window, watching the distant glow of the dance, thinking about the stranger who'd looked at her and seen something more than the town's pariah. It was foolish, she knew, A dangerous man was the last thing she needed in her carefully constructed isolation. But as she prepared for bed, she couldn't forget the weight of his gaze, or the way he'd moved through the crowd unafraid, wearing his reputation like armor. She had been afraid for so long, of Benjamin, of the town, of her own shadow. What must it be like, she wondered, to walk through the world as if you had nothing left to lose? Outside, the wind picked up, sending dust devils dancing across the empty streets. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, its cry echoing off the distant mountains. Clara pulled her thin blanket closer and tried not to think about green eyes that had looked at her and truly seen. In Murphy's boarding house, Jesse Kane sat on a narrow bed, cleaning his guns by lamplight. He had come to Frontiers Hollow for a purpose, tracking the shadow of a dead man and a debt unpaid. But the woman in the shadows, the one they'd all been so careful not to look at, she was unexpected. He'd seen her kind before in a dozen frontier towns, women ground down by hard men and harder lives, wearing their grief like a second skin. But there had been something else in her eyes, a flame not quite extinguished despite everyone's best efforts to smother it. Kane set his guns aside and rolled a cigarette, his mind already working through the complications. He had business here that couldn't wait, old ghosts that demanded their due. The last thing he needed was to notice a woman with sad eyes and secrets of her own. But as smoke curled toward the ceiling and the town settled into uneasy sleep, Jesse Kane found himself thinking of her anyway. In a place like Frontiers Hollow, the broken souls had a way of finding each other, drawn together like iron filings to a magnet. Tomorrow, he would begin his hunt for the truth about what happened to his brother. Tonight, he wondered what truth the widow Whitmore was hiding behind her careful distance and downcast eyes. The dance ended as the moon rose high, families drifting back to their homes with tired children and full bellies. The lanterns were extinguished one by one, until only the stars remained to light the desert town. But in two separate rooms, two outcasts lay awake, each nursing their own wounds and wondering what the morning would bring. The abandoned stable sat a half-mile outside Frontiers Hollow, its weathered boards bleached bone-white by years of desert sun. Jesse Kane had found it on his second day in town, drawn by the isolation and the clear sight lines in all directions. A man in his profession learned to value such things: a quick escape route, walls thick enough to stop a bullet, and distance from curious eyes. He'd paid old Murphy a week's rent but spent little time in the boarding house bed. The stable suited him better, even with its gaps in the roof that let in stars and occasional rain. His horse seemed to approve, munching contentedly on the wild grass that grew around the foundation. From here, Kane could see the town spread below like a child's toy set, could watch the comings and goings without being observed himself. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the saguaro cacti standing like silent sentinels, their arms raised in eternal surrender. Buzzards circled lazily overhead, riding the thermals, patient as death itself. He rolled a cigarette and leaned against the doorframe, his mind working through what he'd learned so far. The sheriff, Watson, was new to the position, barely 2 years in the job. The previous sheriff, a man named Randall Cobb, had died of apoplexy. They said natural causes. Kane's jaw tightened. There had been nothing natural about what Cobb had done to his brother. Samuel Kane had been 19, full of dreams about California gold and Pacific sunsets. He'd stopped in Frontiers Hollow to rest his horse and never left buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the desert after Cobb had accused him of cheating at cards. No trial, no witnesses willing to speak, just frontier justice, quick and final. Jesse had spent 3 years tracking down the truth, following cold trails and whispered rumors. Cobb was dead now, beyond his reach, but there were others who'd been there that night, others who'd watched a boy die and said nothing. The sound of approaching hooves pulled him from his thoughts. A woman on a paint mare was riding toward the old stable, and Kane recognized her immediately. The widow from the dance, though she looked different in the daylight. Her severe black dress had been replaced by a practical riding skirt and white blouse, her hair braided and pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat. She pulled up short when she saw him, her hand moving instinctively to the rifle in her saddle scabbard. Kane raised his hand slowly, showing empty palms. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, touching his hat brim. "Didn't mean to startle you." Clara's eyes narrowed, studying him with a wariness he recognized. "Mr. Kane, I wasn't aware anyone was using the old Jameson place. Just temporary." "I'll move on if it's a problem." "It's not my land to say." She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Though you should know the well's gone bad. Alkaline. It'll make you sick as a dog if you drink from it. Appreciate the warning." They regarded each other across the dusty yard. Two people caught outside the normal flow of social interaction. Finally. Clara dismounted, moving with the easy grace of someone raised to the saddle. "I come here sometimes," she said. Not quite an explanation. "To think it's quiet. I won't disturb you. You already have." But there was no real heat in it. She tied her horse to a post and walked to the edge of the stable's shade, looking out over the desert. "They say you killed a man in Tucson." "They say a lot of things." "Did you?" Kane considered the question. And the woman asking it, there was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. "Yeah, though he was trying real hard to kill me first." Clara nodded as if this made perfect sense. Self-defense. Then, the law didn't see it that way. The law sees what it wants to see. The bitterness in her voice was sharp as alkali water. She glanced at him sideways. "Why are you really here, Mr. Kane? Frontiers Hollow isn't exactly on the way to anywhere. Looking for some people who used to live here. Maybe you knew them. Would have been about 3 years ago. I've only been here 4 years myself. Came as a bride from Prescott." Her mouth twisted. "Benjamin wanted a wife with connections to respectable people. He got more than he bargained for." Kane heard the story beneath the words. A young woman married off to a stranger, discovering too late the nature of her bargain. It was common enough on the frontier, where women were scarce and desperation plenty. "I should go," Clara said abruptly. "If someone sees us talking." She didn't finish, but Kane understood. Her reputation balanced on a knife's edge already. "Wait." He didn't know why he stopped her. "The well might be bad, but I've got clean water from town. Coffee, too, if you've a mind for it." She turned back, surprise flickering across her face. When was the last time anyone had offered her simple hospitality? "I shouldn't. Probably not." But she stayed anyway, settling on an overturned crate while Kane built a small fire and set his battered pot to boil. They drank coffee in companionable silence, watching the heat shimmer off the desert floor. "Your horse," Clara said eventually, nodding to the black gelding. "He's got good lines. Spanish blood?" His grandmother was a Mustang mare, caught wild in the Sangre de Cristos. His grandfather was cavalry stock, stolen from Fort Union. Kane smiled slightly. "He's got an outlaw's pedigree. Like his rider." "Like his rider," Kane agreed. A dust devil whirled past, carrying tumbleweeds and memories. Clara pulled her hat lower against the sun. "That marked grave behind the church, the one with no name, that's your brother, isn't it?" Kane's hand stilled on his cup. "How did you know?" "You've got the same eyes. Green as bottle glass. Mrs. Henderson mentioned a boy came through few years back with eyes like that. Said he was caught cheating at cards, but..." She shrugged. "Benjamin played in that game. He came home with more money than he'd left with. Bought a new saddle the next day. Always wondered about that." "You saying Benjamin was there when they killed him?" "I'm saying Benjamin was there." Clara stood, dusting off her skirts. "I'm also saying Benjamin's dead and can't answer questions. But Randall Cobb didn't act alone. He had deputies, drinking companions, men who are still walking around town, wearing their secrets like Sunday clothes." She mounted her horse in one smooth motion, gathering the reins. "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Kane." "But you should know. Asking questions about that night is like poking a rattlesnake den, and some snakes have longer memories than others. She was gone before he could respond, riding back toward town with her back straight as an iron rod. Kane watched until she was just a speck against the vast canvas of the desert, then turned back to his cold coffee and hot thoughts. That afternoon found him at the town's small medical office, where Dr. Marcus Finch was stitching up a boy who'd fallen from a barn loft. The child, no more than 8, was trying hard not to cry while his mother held his hand. "There now, brave as a cavalry soldier," the doctor said, his hand steady despite his age. "You'll have a scar to show the pretty girls." The boy managed a watery smile. His mother gathered him up, pressing coins into the doctor's hand. "Thank you, Dr. Finch. Say thank you, Thomas." "Thank you," the boy mumbled, already focused on the peppermint stick the doctor produced from his pocket. After they left, Finch turned his attention to Kane. "Don't believe we've met. I'm the closest thing to law and order when it comes to body, if not soul. Jesse Kane." He watched the doctor's face carefully, saw the flicker of recognition. "Ah, the gentleman causing such a stir among our proper citizens." Finch washed his hands in a basin, his movements precise. "Are you injured, Mr. Kane? Or is this a social call? Looking for information about a boy died here 3 years back, Samuel Kane." The doctor's hands paused for just a moment. "I remember. Brought him in with a bullet wound to the chest. Nothing I could do. You examined the body? Sheriff Cobb didn't see the need. Clear case of self-defense," he said. Whose self was being defended? Finch dried his hands slowly, considering. He was a small man, neat as a pin, with intelligent eyes behind wire spectacles. "Mr. Kane, I've lived in Frontier's Hollow for 15 years. I've delivered babies and closed eyes, set bones and dug bullets out of men too stubborn to die. I've learned when to speak and when to hold my tongue. And which is this?" The doctor moved to his window, gazing out at the street. "Mrs. Whitmore was here earlier today, bringing medicine to the Martinez family. Their youngest has the croup. She does that, helps where she can, despite how they treat her." Kane waited, knowing the apparent change of subject meant something. "She's a good woman in a hard situation. Her husband was a brute, and this town failed her. We all knew what Benjamin was, but we did nothing. Respectability. You see, the Whitmore name still meant something, even tarnished as it was." "What's this got to do with my brother?" Finch turned back to him. "Everything's connected in a small town. Mr. Kane, your brother died because he was an outsider who threatened the order of things. Mrs. Whitmore suffers because she survived when she should have been properly broken. And you," he adjusted his spectacles, "you're here stirring up mud that's been settled for years. Some things shouldn't stay settled. Perhaps not, but consider, your brother is beyond help. Mrs. Whitmore is not. Your questions, your presence, they put her at risk. This town has a way of punishing those who step out of line." "You saying I should leave?" "I'm saying be careful who gets caught in your crossfire." The doctor moved to his desk, pulling out a ledger. "But since you asked about that night, Cobb's usual companions were his deputies, Jake Morrison and Will Tanner. Morrison drinks at the Golden Dollar every night. Tanner runs the livery stable. Both were there when your brother died." Kane memorized the names. "Why tell me this?" "Because I took an oath to do no harm. Sometimes that means staying quiet. Sometimes it means speaking up." Finch's eyes were sad behind his spectacles. "I've stayed quiet too long about too many things." That evening, Kane positioned himself at the bar of the Golden Dollar, nursing a whiskey and watching Jake Morrison hold court at a corner table. The former deputy was a big man running to fat, with the red nose of a dedicated drinker and the loud voice of someone used to being heard. "So there I was," Morrison was saying, "facing down 3 Apache braves with nothing but my wit and my Winchester." The story was clearly well worn, the other patrons nodding along at the familiar beats. Kane waited, patient as a hunter, until Morrison finally headed out back to relieve himself. Kane followed, moving silent as smoke. Morrison was still fumbling with his buttons when Kane's hand fell on his shoulder. The bigger man spun, reaching for his gun, but Kane already had his Colt drawn. The barrel pressed against Morrison's soft belly. "Easy now," Kane said quietly. "Just want to talk about Samuel Kane." Morrison's eyes went wide, then narrow. "Don't know any Samuel Kane?" "Sure you do. Boy you helped murder 3 years back, accused of cheating at cards." "That was legal. Sheriff's justice." "Whose idea was it to say he was cheating?" Morrison's mouth worked, but no sound came. Kane pressed the gun barrel a little harder. "Cobb's dead. Can't hurt you now. But I can. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." The words came out in a rush. "The boy won fair, but Benjamin Whitmore couldn't stand losing to some kid. Said he must have cheated, got Cobb all worked up about it. Your brother tried to leave, but Cobb wouldn't let him. Said he had to return the money. But there was no cheating. No, the kid was just lucky. Had a run of good cards." Morrison was sweating now, despite the cool night air. Whitmore wanted that money back. He'd lost more than he could afford. Had debts coming due. Cobb owed him favors from way back. So they killed him for it. The boy went for his gun. Cobb shot him. Self-defense. How much did Whitmore pay you to back that story? Morrison's silence was answer enough. Kane stepped back, holstering his weapon. "Get out of town. Tonight. If I see you again, we'll finish this conversation different." Morrison didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled back into the saloon, and within minutes, Kane heard him making excuses, saying something about urgent business in Tucson. One down. Tomorrow he'd visit Will Tanner at the livery. But tonight, Kane found himself walking past the widow's house, noting the single lamp burning in her window. She'd risked much telling him what she had. In this town of closed mouths and closed minds, she'd chosen truth over safety. He left something on her doorstep, nothing that would compromise her, just a small bag of coffee beans and a note, for the kindness of warnings about bad water. Inside her house, Clara watched through the curtain as the tall figure melted back into the darkness. She'd heard the whispers already. Jake Morrison had left town in a hurry, pale as milk and babbling about urgent business. She knew what that meant. Knew, too, that the circles Kane was drawing would eventually close around her. But for the first time in a year, she felt something other than the crushing weight of merely existing. It might have been hope. It might have been fear. Most likely, it was both, twisted together like strands of rope, pulling her toward something she couldn't yet name. The Golden Dollar Saloon reeked of stale beer and desperation when Clara pushed through the bat-wing doors. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. A respectable widow didn't enter such establishments, especially not one already balanced on the knife's edge of scandal. But respectability had died with Benjamin, and Clara was tired of pretending otherwise. She'd come for medicine, doctor. Finch was tending a difficult birth outside town, and old Pete behind the bar kept a stock of whiskey strong enough to clean wounds. The Sanchez boy had gashed his leg on barbed wire, and infection was setting in. "Mrs. Whitmore." Pete's voice cracked like dried leather. "This ain't no place for... I need a bottle of your strongest whiskey. For medicinal purposes." She placed coins on the scarred wood of the bar. "Unless you'd prefer the Sanchez family lose their eldest son." Pete glanced nervously at the men scattered throughout the saloon. Clara recognized most of them. Hands from the surrounding ranches, a few merchants. Will Tanner from the livery stable. And in the corner, nursing a beer with the dedication of a man with nowhere else to be, sat Luther Cross. Luther had been courting her, after a fashion, showing up at her door with wildflowers and whiskey breath, talking about how a woman needed a man's protection, how the town would look more kindly on her if she remarried, how he could overlook her reputation if she could overlook his drinking. Now he stood, weaving slightly, his face flushed with more than alcohol. Well, the widow Whitmore, gracing us common folk with her presence. Mr. Cross." Clara kept her voice level. I'm here on an errand of mercy. Nothing more. Mercy. He laughed, an ugly sound. That what you're calling it these days? Heard you been riding out to the old Jameson place, visiting that killer Kane. The saloon grew quieter still. Clara felt the weight of every gaze, the judgment in every silence. I've ridden past the Jameson place. Yeah, it's on the way to the Sanchez farm. Funny how you never took that route before he showed up. Luther moved closer, and Clara could smell the sour whiskey on his breath, see the mean glint in his eyes. This was Benjamin all over again, a man who'd been told no and couldn't stand it. Step back, Mr. Cross. Or what? You'll have your gunslinger friend deal with me, like he dealt with Jake Morrison? Morrison left town of his own accord, after Kane threatened him. Everyone knows it. Luther's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. You're playing a dangerous game, woman. This town's been patient with you, considering what you done to poor Benjamin. But patience runs out. Let go of me. His grip tightened. Maybe you need a reminder of how a proper woman behaves. The Batwing doors crashed open. Jesse Kane stood silhouetted against the harsh afternoon light, his presence filling the doorway like a storm cloud. His hand rested casual on his gun butt, but his eyes were anything but casual. The lady asked you to let go. Luther's hand dropped as if burned. This ain't your business, Kane. I'm making it my business. Kane stepped inside, his spurs ringing against the floorboards. Each step was measured, deliberate. Apologize to Mrs. Whitmore. Apologize? For what? Speaking the truth. Luther's courage was returning, bolstered by the presence of other men. Everyone knows she killed her husband, and now she's taking up with a murderer. Birds of a feather. Kane moved faster than thought. His fist connected with Luther's jaw, sending the man sprawling into a table. Glasses shattered. Men scrambled back. I said apologize. Luther struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. His hand went for his gun, but Kane already had his Colt drawn. The barrel steady as stone. Don't be stupid, Kane said quietly. You're drunk and you're slow. Walk away while you can. The moment stretched taut as wire. Then Will Tanner stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. Come on, Luther, you've had enough. Let's get you home. Luther let himself be led away, but not before shooting a look of pure venom at Clara. This ain't over. You've shown your true colors now. Woman, the whole town will know by morning. After they left, Kane holstered his weapon and turned to Clara. She stood rigid by the bar, her face pale but composed. You shouldn't have done that. Man needed a lesson in manners. You've made things worse. They'll say I'm... She couldn't finish. They'll say what they've been saying all along. Difference is, now they know there's consequences for it. Pete slid a bottle across the bar. Your whiskey, Mrs. Whitmore. No charge. She took it with trembling hands. Thank you. Kane walked her outside, where her horse waited patiently. The sun was brutal overhead, baking the street into hard-packed clay. A few townspeople had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Their whispers followed Clara like tumbleweeds. I can ride with you to the Sanchez place. Kane offered. No. She mounted quickly, gathering her reins. You've done enough. I don't need... She stopped, swallowing hard. I don't need your protection. I know you don't. Doesn't mean you can't accept it when offered. She looked down at him, this dangerous man who'd appeared from nowhere and upset the careful balance of her isolation. Why do you care what happens to me? Maybe because you're the only person in this town who told me the truth. Maybe because I know what it's like to be condemned for surviving. He touched his hat brim. Or maybe I just don't like bullies. Clara rode away without another word. But Kane saw the way her shoulders slowly straightened, the way she held her head a little higher. Small victories, perhaps, but victories nonetheless. That evening, Reverend Thomas Blackwood appeared at Clara's door. He was a thin man with the aesthetic face of a medieval saint and the rigid backbone of a Puritan judge. Clara knew why he'd come before he opened his mouth. Mrs. Whitmore, may I come in? She stepped aside wordlessly, leading him to her small parlor. He sat on the edge of a chair as if comfort might be contagious, his Bible clutched in his bony hands. "I'm concerned about your spiritual welfare," he began. "This association with Mr. Kane, there is no association. You were seen together at the saloon this afternoon. He acted in your defense in a most violent manner. He acted when no one else would." The words came out sharper than intended. "Where was the church's protection when Luther Cross put his hands on me? Mr. Cross is a troubled man, but he means well. He's offered to marry you, to restore your reputation." "My reputation?" Clara laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Tell me, Reverend, what exactly is my reputation? Murderer, Jezebel, or just a woman who had the audacity to survive?" Blackwood's face pinched. "You're distraught. This is exactly why a woman needs guidance, needs a husband's steady hand. Like Benjamin's steady hand." She held up her arm, pulling back the sleeve. Old scars marked her skin like a map of misery. "Is this the guidance you mean?" The Reverend had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Benjamin was imperfect, but he was your husband. Your vows were broken the first time he raised his hand to me. Where was the church then? Where were you when I came to service with bruises hidden beneath my Sunday best? If you had come to me, I did come to you." Her voice was quiet now, deadly. "A month after the wedding, you told me to be a better wife, to pray harder, to submit as the Bible commands." Blackwood stood abruptly. "I'll pray for your soul, Mrs. Whitmore. But I warn you, continuing this path with Kane will only lead to ruin. The town has been patient with you, but that patience is not infinite." After he left, Clara sat in the gathering darkness, her hands folded in her lap. The house felt smaller than ever, the walls pressing in like a coffin. She understood now what Kane had done at the saloon. He'd forced her to choose a side in a war she'd been trying to avoid. Outside, the sun died in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise. Clara made her own choice then, saddling her horse and riding out into the desert evening. She found Kane where she knew he'd be, at the old stable, sitting by a small fire with his back to a wall. He looked up at her approach but didn't seem surprised. "Reverend Blackwood paid me a visit," she said, dismounting. "Let me guess. Hellfire and damnation if you don't mend your ways." "Something like that." She moved to the fire, holding out her hands to the warmth. The desert turned cold quick when the sun went down. "He's not wrong. You know, being seen with you will ruin what little standing I have left. You want me to leave town?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames dance. "I want a lot of things. I want Benjamin to have never existed. I want this town to see me as something more than a cautionary tale. I want to stop being afraid all the time." She looked at him then, firelight catching in her eyes. "But what I want most is to stop caring what they think." Kane poured coffee from his battered pot, handing her a cup. "That's the first step to freedom." "Is that what you are? Free? Free as a man can be with a price on his head." They sat in companionable silence, two outlaws in their own ways. Finally, Clara spoke again, her voice soft. "Tell me about your brother." So he did. He told her about Samuel, young and eager, convinced he'd find fortune in the goldfields, how he'd raised the boy after their parents died of fever, how Samuel could charm birds from trees and never met a stranger, how he'd won that poker game fair and square, just a run of luck that turned deadly. "He was all I had," Kane finished. "Only family left. I failed to protect him. You weren't there. You couldn't have known. I knew he was too trusting, too young. Should have kept him close." Clara set down her cup and looked at him directly. "I was there when Benjamin died. Could have helped him. Maybe. Could have ridden for the doctor faster. Could have tried to stop the bleeding. I didn't." Kane waited, letting her find the words. "He'd been drinking at the Crossed Keys, lost money he didn't have, came home in a rage. Worse than usual. Started in on me about the money, about how I was a burden, how he should have married the baker girl instead." Her voice was steady, clinical. "He came at me with a bottle. I ran. He chased me to the stable, still raging. His horse was already saddled. He'd been planning to ride out again. In his state, mounting that horse. He fell. The horse spooked. Benjamin was too drunk to keep his seat. Went over backward, hit his head on the fence post. She met Cain's eyes. I watched him die, sat there in the dirt and watched the life go out of him. When I was sure he was gone, only then did I ride for help. That's not murder, that's justice. Is it? She pulled her shawl tighter. I could have saved him. Maybe. Part of me, most of me, wanted him dead. Had wanted it for so long. So when the opportunity came, you survived. That's what matters. The town doesn't see it that way. The town's wrong about a lot of things. A coyote howled somewhere in the darkness, answered by another. The desert was alive with hidden dangers. But somehow, sitting by this small fire with this dangerous man. Clara felt safer than she had in years. I should go, she said finally. If I'm not back before full dark, people will talk more. They'll talk anyway. Yes, but I don't have to make it easier for them. She stood, brushing dust from her skirts. Thank you, for today, for listening. Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name. You don't owe this town anything. Not your grief, not your guilt, not your fear. You paid those debts already. She mounted her horse, looking down at him. What happens when you find what you're looking for? When your brother's death is avenged? I move on. To where? Wherever the wind takes me. Maybe north. Heard Montana's got room for men looking to start over. Just men? Their eyes met across the dying fire. Not just men, he said quietly. Clara rode home through the darkness, her mind churning with possibilities she hadn't dared consider. Behind her, Jesse Cain sat by his fire, planning tomorrow's visit to Will Tanner, but for the first time in 3 years, vengeance wasn't the only thing on his mind. In town, Luther Cross nursed his bruised jaw and bruised pride, whispering poison in willing ears. By morning, everyone would know that the widow Whitmore had chosen her side. The question was, what would they do about it? The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human drama. But change was coming to Frontier's Hollow, whether the town was ready or not. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the stable walls. They had been meeting like this for weeks now, Clara arriving after dark, Jessie always waiting with coffee and that quiet understanding that asked for nothing but her presence. Tonight was different. Tonight the air thrummed with unspoken words and possibilities. Clara sat closer to the fire than usual, her shawl abandoned despite the desert chill. She watched Jesse's hands as he added another piece of mesquite to the flame's strong hands, scarred from years of hard living, but gentle in their movements. Will Tanner left town yesterday, she said finally. Sold his share of the livery to his partner and headed east. Said his sister in Missouri needed him. Jesse nodded slowly. Man developed a powerful need to be elsewhere after our conversation. What did you say to him? The truth. That I knew what he'd done. What they'd all done. That my brother's blood was on his hands. Jesse's jaw tightened. He broke down, said he'd been drinking that night, just went along with what Cobb and Benjamin wanted. Been carrying the guilt ever since. And you let him go? He was a coward, not a killer. Living with what he'd done was punishment enough. Jesse looked at her across the fire. Besides, I'm tired of being angry. 3 years of hate is a heavy load to carry. Clara understood that weight. She'd carried her own anger so long it had become part of her, like a bone that had healed wrong. But sitting here with Jesse, she could feel it loosening, transforming into something else. The town's turned colder. She said, Mrs. Henderson won't sell me flour. The minister's wife crosses the street when she sees me coming. They blame me for driving out their men. You regret it? No. The word came quick and certain. For the first time in my life, I don't care what they think. It's... She searched for words. Liberating, terrifying, but liberating. Jesse shifted, moving around the fire until he sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. That's what freedom feels like. Scary at first, like standing at the edge of a cliff. But once you jump, you learn to fly, or you learn falling isn't as bad as the fear of it. They sat in silence, shoulders almost touching. Clara was acutely aware of every inch between them, the space both vast and insignificant. She thought of all the nights she'd lain beside Benjamin, rigid with fear and revulsion. This was different. This pull toward Jessie was like gravity, natural and undeniable. "I should teach you to dance," Jessie said suddenly. Clara laughed, surprised. "Here? Now?" "Why not? You said you used to love it. Before." He stood, holding out his hand. No one watching but the stars. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. He pulled her up gently, his other hand settling a light on her waist. There was no music but the wind through the boards, no floor but hard-packed earth, but as they began to move, none of that mattered. They swayed slowly, finding their rhythm. Clara had forgotten this, the simple pleasure of moving in harmony with another person, of being held without fear. Jessie's hand on her waist was steady but not possessive, guiding but not controlling. "My mother taught me," he said quietly. "Said a man who couldn't dance was only half civilized. She sounds wise. She would have liked you. I think she had strong opinions about women standing up for themselves." They turned slowly, Clara's bare feet whispering against the dirt. The firelight caught in her hair, turning it to copper and gold. Jessie's breath was warm against her temple. "Clara," his voice was rough, "I need to tell you something." She pulled back slightly to look at him, but didn't step away. "What is it?" "I'm leaving soon, maybe next week." "There's nothing keeping me here now except..." "Except..." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Except you, and that's not fair to either of us. You deserve better than a man with blood on his hands and a price on his head." "What if I don't want better?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "What if I just want you?" The space between them collapsed. Jessie's mouth found hers, the kiss fierce and desperate and tender all at once. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Years of loneliness and longing poured into this one perfect moment, when they broke apart, both breathing hard. Jessie rested his forehead against hers. "Clara, She silenced him with another kiss. Softer this time. Exploratory. She felt his restraint in the tension of his muscles, the careful way he held her. It made her braver, made her want to shatter that control. "I've been dead for years," she whispered against his mouth. "You make me want to live again." Something broke in Jessie then. He pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressed against the small of her back. Clara went willingly, every nerve ending alive with sensation. This was nothing like Benjamin's rough handling. This was worship, reverence. Two damaged souls finding solace in each other. They sank to their knees by the fire, still entwined. Jessie's hands shook as he touched her face, her throat, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "Are you sure?" he asked, and she loved him for asking, for giving her the choice Benjamin never had. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was a claiming and a surrender, a healing and a breaking open. Clara discovered desire could be a gift freely given, not something taken. Jessie's hands and mouth erased every harsh touch that had come before, replacing brutality with tenderness, fear with trust. Afterward, they lay wrapped in horse blankets. Clara's head on Jessie's chest, listening to his heartbeat. The fire had died to embers, but she felt warm from the inside out. "I never knew it could be like that," she said quietly. Jessie's arm tightened around her. "Like what?" "Safe, good, like coming home." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You are good. Clara, don't let anyone tell you different." They talked through the night, sharing stories and dreams and the kind of truths that only come in darkness. Clara told him about the baby she'd lost, the hope that had died with it. Jessie told her about the nightmares that woke him, his brother's voice calling for help that never came. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they dressed in comfortable silence. Clara knew she should feel shame or regret, but all she felt was a bone-deep contentment, like something long broken had finally been set right. "What happens now?" she asked, watching him bank the fire. "I don't know." Jesse turned to her, his expression serious. "I won't lie to you, Clara. The life I lead isn't safe. There's always another town, another man with a grudge or a badge. I can't offer you stability or respectability. I've had respectability. It nearly killed me." She moved to him, placing her hands on his chest. "But I won't be the woman waiting and worrying while you chase danger. If you go, I go with you. The town can burn for all I care." The vehemence in her voice surprised them both. "I'm done living for their approval, done being their cautionary tale." Jesse caught her hands, bringing them to his lips. "Think on it. Really think. Once we leave, there's no coming back. There's nothing here for me to come back to." They rode back toward town separately, Clara going first as the sun painted the desert in shades of rose and gold. But she didn't go home. Instead, she rode to the cemetery, to Benjamin's grave. The headstone stood crooked, already being reclaimed by the desert. She stood before it, waiting to feel something: guilt, sorrow, forgiveness, but there was only emptiness, a chapter closed. "I'm leaving," she told the silent stone. "I know you'd hate that, me choosing my own path, living my own life. But you're dead, and I'm not anymore." She turned away without looking back, but stopped short at the sight of a figure by the cemetery gate. "Doctor." Finch stood there, medical bag in hand, clearly returning from a late-night call. "Mrs. Whitmore." He studied her with knowing eyes. "You look different. I feel different. I imagine so." He glanced toward the Jameson place, then back at her. "Mr. Kane is a good man, despite his reputation, or perhaps because of it. Sometimes our scars make us kinder. Are you going to lecture me about propriety?" "Doctor." "No, I'm going to tell you to be happy. God knows this town has given you little enough of that." He touched his hat. "Whatever you decide, you have my blessing. For what it's worth." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. One ally in a hostile world. It was more than she'd expected. Back at her house, she moved with purpose, packing only essentials: her mother's silver brush, a photograph of her parents, the little money she'd saved. Everything else was just weight, chains binding her to a life she no longer wanted. A commotion outside drew her to the window. Sheriff Watson was riding hard toward the Jameson place, a group of armed men behind him. Clara's blood went cold. She grabbed her rifle and rode hard, arriving as the men surrounded the stable. "Jesse Kane," Watson shouted. "Come out with your hands up. We got word from the marshal's office. They're sending men to collect you." Jesse emerged slowly, hands visible but not raised. He looked calm, almost amused. "Morning, Sheriff. Little early for a social call. This isn't a joke. Kane, you're wanted for murder. Time's up." "Whose murder? The man who killed my brother, or the ones who were never charged?" Jesse's voice carried across the morning air. Funny how selective justice is in Frontier's Hollow. Clara pushed through the circle of men, ignoring Watson's protests. She planted herself between Jesse and the guns, her chin raised in defiance. "You'll have to go through me," she said quietly. "Mrs. Whitmore, this isn't your concern. Everything about this man is my concern." She looked at each of the posse members in turn. "Tom Garrett, Jesse helped your boy when he broke his arm last week. Jim Stone, he fixed your wagon wheel and wouldn't take payment. All of you have eaten at my table, accepted my help when you needed it. And now you're here like a lynch mob?" The men shifted uncomfortably. Watson's face reddened. "The law is the law." "Whose law?" Jesse stepped beside Clara. Not behind her, beside her, as equals. "The same law that let Randall Cobb murder my brother? The same law that looked the other way while Benjamin Whitmore beat his wife? You can't prove—" "I have Will Tanner's signed confession." Jesse pulled a paper from his pocket. Written before he left town, names, Dates, everything, including how Sheriff Cobb took bribes to look the other way on all manner of crimes. Watson went pale. Several of the posse members exchanged uneasy glances. "Doctor," Finch pushed through the crowd, reading the confession. "This is legitimate. If this goes to a federal judge, a lot of reputations would be ruined." Jesse finished, "Including some of the men standing here right now." The silence stretched taut. Then Watson slowly lowered his gun. "You have until sunset, both of you. After that, I can't protect you." One by one, the posse melted away, leaving Jesse and Clara alone in the morning light. "You have that confession?" Clara asked. "Every word true. Tanner wrote it out before he left, signed and witnessed by the bartender at the Crossed Keys." Jesse smiled grimly. "Insurance policy. Sunset isn't much time. It's enough." He caught her hand, pulled her close. "If you're still sure." "I've never been less sure and more certain at the same time." She laughed, feeling wild and free. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." He kissed her, there in the daylight where anyone could see, and Clara kissed him back without shame or hesitation. They spent the day preparing, gathering supplies, readying horses, closing out the small remnants of their lives in Frontier's Hollow. Clara sold her house to Dr. Finch for a fraction of its worth, but more than enough for a new start. Jesse settled his debts and collected his gear. As the sun began its descent, they met at the edge of town. Clara wore traveling clothes, practical pants and boots, her hair braided and pinned. She'd never felt more herself. "Ready?" Jesse asked, though his smile said he already knew the answer. "I've been ready my whole life." They rode out as the sun set behind them, painting their shadows long across the desert. Behind them, Frontier's Hollow would gossip and judge and eventually forget. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and freedom. Clara looked at the man riding beside her, this dangerous, gentle man who taught her to dance in firelight and love without fear. For the first time in memory, she wasn't running from something but toward it. "No regrets?" Jesse asked, catching her gaze. "Only that it took so long to find you." They rode into the gathering darkness, two outlaws bound by choice rather than law, by love rather than duty. And in the vast silence of the desert, Clara finally understood what Jesse had meant about learning to fly. The morning sun revealed what Jesse had feared, a dust cloud on the horizon, moving fast. He'd been watching it for the past hour while Clara slept, wrapped in blankets beside the cold remains of their campfire. They'd made good distance from Frontier's Hollow, but not good enough. "Clara," he touched her shoulder gently. "We need to move." She came awake instantly, a skill learned from years of vigilance. Her eyes found the dust cloud immediately. "How many?" "6, maybe 7 riders, an hour behind us, maybe less." They broke camp with practiced efficiency, a routine already established in their week of travel. Clara had adapted to the trail life with surprising ease, never complaining about the hard ground or scarce water, finding joy in small freedoms, wearing pants, riding astride, sleeping under stars without walls to cage her. "The marshal's men?" she asked, securing her bedroll. "Most likely, or bounty hunters. Word travels fast out here." Jesse checked his guns, a ritual as automatic as breathing. "There's a box canyon about 10 miles north. Tricky terrain, but I know a way through. We can lose them in the rocks." They rode hard, pushing the horses as much as they dared. The landscape changed from open desert to broken country, red rocks jutting from the earth like ancient bones. Behind them, the dust cloud grew closer. Clara had become a crack shot under Jesse's tutelage, practicing each evening with his spare pistol. But target shooting was different from pointing a gun at a living person. Jesse glanced at her, saw the determined set of her jaw, and felt both pride and worry twist in his gut. The entrance to the canyon was narrow, barely wide enough for a single horse. Jesse led the way, navigating the twisting path from memory. He'd hidden here before, years ago, when the world was simpler and he was just another young outlaw instead of a man with something to lose. "Jesse!" Clara's voice was tight. They're gaining. He could hear them now, hoofbeats echoing off the canyon walls, shouts as they spotted the fresh tracks. The path forked ahead, one branch leading deeper into the maze, the other to a dead end with high walls. "This way," Jesse called, taking the dead end. "What are you doing?" "Trust me." The canyon terminated in a circular chamber, walls rising 40 feet on all sides. But Jesse knew what others didn't. There was a narrow ledge halfway up the eastern wall, invisible from below, accessed by a treacherous climb hidden behind a fall of rocks. "Leave the horses," he said, already dismounting. "We climb." Clara didn't question, following him up the concealed path. The handholds were treacherous, the drop increasing with each move, but she climbed without hesitation. They reached the ledge just as the first riders entered the chamber below. 7 men. Jesse had been right. He recognized the lead rider, Marshal Tom Bedford from Tucson, a man with a reputation for bringing in his quarry dead rather than alive. The others were typical bounty hunters, hard men with harder lives etched on their faces. "Dead end," one of them said. "Where the hell did they go?" Bedford dismounted, studying the ground. "They're here somewhere. Horses are still warm. Check every crack, every shadow." Jesse and Clara pressed themselves against the back wall of the ledge, barely breathing. Jesse's hand found Clara's, squeezing once. If they were discovered here, there'd be no escape. The ledge was a trap as much as a shelter. Minutes crawled by like hours. The men below grew frustrated, arguments breaking out about whether they'd somehow missed a turn. Then one of them, a lean man with silver conchos on his hat, looked up. "Marshal," he said quietly. "There." Bedford followed his gaze, squinting against the sun. Jesse felt Clara tense beside him, her free hand moving to her gun. "Well, well," Bedford called up. "Jesse Kane, and the widow Whitmore, I presume. Why don't you folks come on down? Save us all some trouble. I'm comfortable where I am." Jesse called back. "Don't be a fool. Kane, you're trapped. No food, no water, nowhere to go but down. We can wait you out." Jesse knew he was right. The ledge had always been a temporary solution, buying time to think. But now, with Clara beside him, the stakes were infinitely higher. "Let her go," Jesse said. "She's got nothing to do with my crimes." Bedford laughed. "She made her choice when she ran off with you. Besides, there's paper on her too now, aiding and abetting a known fugitive. Judge back in Frontiers Hollow was real specific about that." Clara spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clear and strong. "Then I guess we're both outlaws now." "Touching," Bedford said. "But romance won't stop bullets. Last chance. Kane. Come peaceful and I'll see you both get a fair trial. Like the fair trial my brother got?" The marshal's face hardened. "Your brother's been dead 3 years. Time to let go of that grudge. Time to face justice for it, more like." Jesse shifted slightly, mapping angles and distances. 7 men, all armed, all with clear shots if he and Clara showed themselves. The math was brutal. Then Clara did something that stopped his heart. She stood up, fully exposed, her pistol drawn but pointed skyward. "Marshal Bedford," she said calmly, "I have a proposition." "Clara, get down," Jesse hissed. She ignored him. "I know things about Frontiers Hollow, about the men who really run that town, the crimes they've covered up, names, dates, enough to interest a federal prosecutor." Bedford's eyes narrowed. "Keep talking." Sheriff Watson took bribes. The town council skimmed territorial funds meant for the school. The bank president, Mr. Hartwell, has been foreclosing on properties illegally, using forged documents. Clara's voice never wavered. "I was Benjamin Whitmore's wife. I saw the papers, heard the conversations. I know where the bodies are buried, literally in some cases." "Clara, don't," Jesse warned. She was painting a target on herself bigger than any wanted poster. "And you'll testify to all this?" Bedford asked. "In exchange for Jesse's freedom. Full pardon, all charges dropped." "I don't have that authority." "Then get someone who does." Clara cocked her pistol, not pointing it at anyone, but making her intent clear. "Because I'll die before I let you take him, and all that information dies with me." The standoff stretched taut. Jesse watched Clara with a mixture of awe and terror. She'd transformed from the broken woman he'd first met into something fierce and unbending, a force of nature in her own right. Finally, Bedford spoke. "There's a telegraph office in Mayfield, 2 days' ride. I could wire the territorial governor, see what kind of deal he might make, but you'd have to come with us, both of you. And if you're lying about what you know—" "I'm not lying." Jesse stood slowly, keeping his hands visible but ready. "If we come peaceful, you guarantee our safety. No accidents, no shot while trying to escape." Bedford nodded. "You have my word, but you travel in irons, and any funny business, the deal's off." It wasn't much of a choice. Stay on the ledge and eventually die of thirst, or trust the word of a lawman. Jesse looked at Clara, saw the determination in her eyes. "All right," he said. "We're coming down." The descent was trickier than the climb, especially with guns trained on them. They reached the bottom to find themselves quickly surrounded, hands bound, weapons taken. But Bedford kept his word. The restraints weren't cruel, and no one raised a hand to them. As they prepared to ride out, the silver conchoed bounty hunter approached Clara. "That was quite a play, ma'am. But what if the governor doesn't bite?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll find another way. I didn't survive Benjamin Whitmore and Frontier's Hollow just to give up now." The man touched his hat, something like respect in his eyes. "No, ma'am, I don't believe you did." They rode through the afternoon heat, Jesse and Clara side by side despite their bonds. Bedford set a steady pace, but not a punishing one, conscious perhaps that dead prisoners would serve no one. That night, they made camp in a cluster of cottonwoods near a small spring. Jesse and Clara were allowed to sit together, sharing a plate of beans and hardtack under the watchful eyes of their captors. "That was reckless," Jesse said quietly. "Making yourself a target like that. No more reckless than you facing down every ghost from your past." Clara leaned against his shoulder, a small defiance that Bedford chose to ignore. "Besides, I meant what I said. I know enough to bring down half the powerful men in Frontier's Hollow. Benjamin kept records, insurance against his business partners. I know where they're hidden. Why didn't you use them before?" "Because I was alone and afraid. Because I thought surviving was enough." She turned to look at him. "You taught me it wasn't, that there's a difference between being alive and living." Jesse wanted to kiss her, bonds and watching eyes be damned. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers briefly. "If this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, then we face it together." Her voice was fierce. "No more running. Jesse, not from them, not from each other. We make our stand." The next morning brought an unexpected ally, Doctor. Finch rode into camp, dusty and exhausted, clutching a leather portfolio. "Marshal Bedford," he called out. "I've ridden 2 days straight to find you." Bedford's hand went to his gun. "State your business, old man." "My business is justice." Finch dismounted stiffly. "I've brought documents that corroborate everything Mrs. Whitmore claims and more, including evidence about the murder of Samuel Kane." Jesse's breath caught. Bedford motioned the doctor forward, taking the portfolio and scanning its contents. His expression grew progressively grimmer. "How did you come by these?" "After Mr. Kane and Mrs. Whitmore left, there was something of a reckoning in Frontier's Hollow. Accusations flew, old alliances crumbled. Sheriff Watson tried to burn these documents. I intervened." Finch touched his split lip ruefully. "It seemed the right thing to do. Finally." Bedford looked up from the papers. "This changes things. If even half of this is true." "It's all true," Clara said quietly. "Every word." The marshal was quiet for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Cut them loose." His men hesitated. "Sir?" "You heard me. Cut their bonds." Bedford tucked the portfolio inside his coat. "Doctor." "Finch, you'll ride with us to Mayfield. We'll need your testimony along with Mrs. Whitmore's, Mr. Kane. He paused. I'm not saying you're free and clear yet, but it seems there's more to your story than the wanted posters tell. You'll have your chance to speak it to someone who matters. As the ropes fell away from his wrists, Jesse felt something else fall away too. The weight of running, of always looking over his shoulder. It wasn't over. Might never truly be over, but for the first time in 3 years, he could see a path forward that didn't end in gunfire or a noose. Clara rubbed her wrists, then surprised everyone by walking up to Bedford and extending her hand. Thank you, Marshal, for listening. Bedford shook her hand, bemused. Thank me when this is over. Ma'am, we've got a long road ahead. They rode toward Mayfield as a strange procession. Prisoners who weren't quite prisoners, lawmen who weren't quite captors, and an old doctor who'd finally found his courage. The sun beat down mercilessly, but Jesse found himself thinking of the stable back in Frontier's Hollow, of dancing in Firelight and the moment everything changed. Regrets? Clara asked, echoing his question from a week ago. None, he said, and meant it. Whatever waited in Mayfield, trials, testimony, the weight of law and justice, they would face it as they'd learned to face everything else, together, without fear. Dancing on the edge of tomorrow, the road stretched out before them, dusty and uncertain, but for the first time in both their lives, it led toward hope instead of away from pain. And that, Jesse thought as Clara smiled at him in the harsh desert light, made all the difference. The red rocks rose around them like cathedral walls as they fled deeper into the canyon system. Behind them, the thunder of hooves echoed off stone, punctuated by the crack of rifles. A bullet whined past Clara's ear, chipping rock inches from her head. This way! Jesse shouted, yanking his horse hard left into a narrow defile that seemed to lead nowhere. They'd been running for 2 days now, ever since Marshal Bedford had been gunned down in Mayfield. The telegram to the territorial governor had been sent, but someone with power and reach, hadn't wanted that information to arrive. The marshal died with a bullet in his back, and Jesse and Clara had been blamed. Now they were truly outlaws, with fresh blood on their wanted posters and a small army of hired guns on their trail. The defile opened into a wider canyon, its floor soft with centuries of sand. Jesse's horse stumbled, favoring its left front leg. They'd been riding too hard for too long, and the animals were near their breaking point. Jesse! Clara pointed to a dark opening in the canyon wall, a cave, partially hidden by a fall of rocks. They dismounted quickly, leading the exhausted horses into the shadows. The cave went back further than expected, opening into a natural chamber with a small pool of water seeping from the rock. Ancient fire rings showed others had sheltered here before them. Jesse quickly unsaddled the horses while Clara kept watch at the entrance. The pursuing riders thundered past, their shouts fading into the distance. For now, they were safe. Let me see, Clara said, moving to Jesse's side. Blood seeped through his shirt where a bullet had grazed his ribs that morning. It's nothing, he said, but let her peel back the fabric. Nothing doesn't bleed this much. She cleaned the wound with water from the pool, her touch gentle but efficient. Weeks on the trail had taught her field medicine by necessity. You need stitches. Later, when we're somewhere safer. Where's that, Jesse? Where's safer anymore? The exhaustion in her voice cut deeper than any bullet. Bedford's dead. Finch is probably dead too. Everyone who could have helped us. Hey! He caught her hands, stilling their movement. Look at me. She met his eyes, and he saw the fear she'd been hiding beneath fierce determination. They'd been living on adrenaline and hope, but both were running thin. We're alive, he said simply. That's what matters. As long as we're breathing, we've got a chance. They'll never stop hunting us now. We're worth more dead than alive. Then we make ourselves worth more alive. Jesse winced as he pulled on a clean shirt. Those documents Finch brought, you memorized them? Clara nodded. Every name, every crime. Then we've still got leverage. We just need to find someone who'll listen, someone the hired guns can't reach. And how do we do that when half the territory wants us dead? Jesse was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, Fort Crenshaw, 3 days north if we push hard. Federal military post, outside territorial jurisdiction. The commanding officer there, Colonel Marcus, has a reputation for being incorruptible. 3 days through open desert. They'll run us down. Not if we travel at night, rest during the day. He moved to the cave entrance, scanning the canyon. And not if we make them think we went another direction. That night, they implemented Jesse's plan. He backtracked on foot, laying false trails toward the south while Clara prepared the horses for hard travel. When he returned, they set out under a crescent moon. Navigating by stars and instinct, the desert at night was a different world, cooler but no less dangerous. Rattlesnakes hunted in the darkness, and every shadow could hide an enemy. They rode in tense silence, alert to every sound. On the second night, disaster nearly found them. They'd stopped to water the horses at a small spring when Clara's mount suddenly screamed and reared. In the moonlight, she saw the distinctive pattern of a rattlesnake, coiled and ready to strike again. The horse bolted, Clara fighting to keep her seat. The snake had bitten deep into the animal's leg, and panic gave it unnatural strength. They careened through a maze of Joshua trees and rocks, branches tearing at Clara's clothes and skin. Jesse spurred after them, but his own exhausted mount couldn't match the pace of a terrified horse. He could only watch as Clara and her horse vanished into the darkness, the sound of their flight fading into silence. He found her an hour later, threw himself from his horse when he saw the still form on the ground. But she was conscious, sitting up slowly as he reached her. "I'm all right," she said, though blood ran from a gash on her forehead. "But the horse—" The animal lay nearby, sides heaving, the snake bite already swelling grotesquely. There was nothing to be done. Jesse ended its suffering with a single shot that seemed to echo forever in the night. Now they had one horse between them, and Fort Crenshaw was still a day away. They'd have to ride double, slowing their pace dangerously. "We're not going to make it," Clara said, stating fact rather than surrendering to despair. "We'll make it." Jesse helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. "We've come too far to quit now." They rode through the rest of the night pressed close together, Clara eventually sagging back against his chest as exhaustion claimed her. Jesse held her steady, guiding the tired horse through increasingly rough terrain as the land began to rise toward the fort. Dawn was painting the sky purple and gold when they saw the dust cloud again. Their pursuers had found the trail, closing fast on fresh horses. "Clara, wake up!" Jesse's voice was urgent. "Company coming?" She straightened, instantly alert. The fort was visible now, perhaps 5 miles distant, its flag a tiny speck of color against the mountains. But 5 miles might as well have been 50 with their enemies closing so fast. "Jesse!" Clara's voice was strange, decisive. "Let me down." "What?" "Let me down." "You can make it to the fort alone. Get help. Tell them what we know. I'm not leaving you." "You are." She twisted to look at him. "Because it's the only way either of us survives. They want me alive to find out what I know. You. They'll kill on sight. Let me buy you time." "No. Jesse Kane, you listen to me." Her eyes blazed with the same fire he'd first seen that night by the stable. "I didn't come this far to watch you die for stubborn pride. I can hold them off, give you the head start you need." "Clara," she kissed him, fierce and desperate. "Go. Live. Come back for me." Before he could stop her, she'd slipped from the horse, stumbled, then found her footing. She had his rifle. When had she taken it, and was already moving to take cover behind a cluster of rocks. "Clara, go!" She fired a shot that kicked up dust near the approaching riders, making them scatter. "Now!" Jesse had seconds to decide. Every instinct screamed against leaving her, but the cold tactician in him knew she was right. He was the one they'd shoot on sight. She had information they needed, and if he could reach the fort— He spurred the exhausted horse toward Fort Crenshaw, each hoofbeat feeling like betrayal. Behind him, he heard the sharp crack of Clara's rifle, spacing her shots to make them count, then return fire, a terrible symphony that grew fainter with distance. The horse gave out a mile from the fort, simply stopping mid-stride and folding to its knees. Jesse hit the ground running, his boots slipping in the loose shale as he ran toward the gates. His lungs burned, his vision blurred, but he didn't stop. The sentries saw him coming, rifles raised. "Halt! Jesse Kane!" he gasped out. "Need to see Colonel Marcus. Federal crime, murder of a U.S. Marshal, evidence of corruption." The words came in ragged bursts, but they were enough. The gates opened, soldiers surrounding him. Through the chaos of questions and commands, Jesse managed to make himself understood. The woman, 5 miles south. She has information about Marshal Bedford's murder. They'll kill her once they have it. Colonel Marcus was a lean man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He listened to Jesse's abbreviated account, then barked orders. Within minutes, a mounted patrol was thundering out the gates. "If she's as important as you say, they won't kill her immediately," Marcus said. "They'll want to know who else she might have told." Jesse wanted to ride with the patrol, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He'd pushed past exhaustion into something else, a gray twilight where Clara's face swam before him like a vision. The wait was agony. He paced the colonel's office, told the full story twice, produced Will Tanner's confession from its hiding place in his boot. Marcus's expression grew progressively grimmer as he understood the web of corruption they'd uncovered. "If even half of this is true, we're looking at a conspiracy that goes to the highest levels of territorial government," the colonel said. "No wonder they wanted you silenced. Clara has more. Names, dates, hidden records. Jesse stopped, listening. Hoofbeats in the courtyard. He was at the window before Marcus could stop him. The patrol was returning, and his heart nearly stopped when he saw the figure slumped in the sergeant's saddle. Clara, bloodied but breathing, her hands bound. "She was fighting like a wildcat when we found her," the sergeant reported. "Took down 2 of them before they overwhelmed her. The rest scattered when they saw us coming." Jesse was at her side before the sergeant finished speaking. Clara's eyes fluttered open, focused on his face. "You came back," she whispered. "Always," he said, his voice rough. "Always." The fort's doctor declared her injuries painful but not life-threatening cuts. Bruises, a bullet graze across her shoulder that matched Jesse's own wound. While she recovered, Colonel Marcus set the wheels of justice in motion. Telegrams flew to Washington, to federal prosecutors, to newspaper editors hungry for a story of frontier corruption. The names Clara provided, backed by documentary evidence and witness testimony, painted a picture of systematic graft and murder that shocked even cynical observers. Within a week, federal marshals were descending on Frontiers Hollow and other territorial towns. Sheriff Watson was arrested trying to flee to Mexico. The banker Hartwell was found dead in his study. A suicide note confessing to years of fraud, one by one. The powerful men who'd thought themselves untouchable found themselves facing justice. "It's not over," Marcus warned Jesse and Clara as they sat in his office, finally healed enough to travel. "You've made powerful enemies. There will always be someone with a grudge, a relative seeking vengeance, a hired gun looking to make a name. We know," Clara said simply. "But we're done running from shadows." Marcus studied them, these unlikely heroes who'd brought down a criminal empire through sheer determination and refusal to break. "I've wired the governor. In light of your service to the territory, and considering the circumstances of the original charges, he's prepared to issue full pardons. You're free citizens again." Free. The word sat strange in Jesse's mouth. For 3 years, he'd defined himself by what he was running from. Now, suddenly, he could run towards something instead. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. Jesse and Clara exchanged glances. They'd talked about this during the long nights of recovery, spinning dreams like gold thread. "North," Clara said. "Montana. Maybe somewhere we can start fresh. Together," Jesse added, taking her hand. Marcus smiled. "I know a rancher up near Billings. Good man. Owes me a favor. He's always looking for reliable hands. And something tells me you two know how to work." They left Fort Crenshaw with pardons in hand and directions to a new life. The horses were fresh, the supplies adequate, and the road ahead clear for the first time in memory. As they paused at the top of a rise, looking back at the fort one last time, Clara moved her horse closer to Jesse's. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing their old refrain. Jesse thought about his brother, finally avenged, about the blood on his hands and the prices on their heads, now lifted, about the woman beside him who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger than steel. "None," he said. "You?" "Only one." She smiled. "I never did get to dance with you in front of other people. Properly, with music and everything. Montana has dance halls." Jesse said, "I hear they even let notorious women and reformed gunfighters attend." "Then Montana it is." They rode north as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of night. Behind them lay graves and ghosts, bitter memories and blood feuds. Ahead waited something neither had dared hope for, a chance to live without looking over their shoulders, to build rather than destroy, to love without fear. The desert gave way to grassland to pine forests. Each mile took them further from who they'd been and closer to who they might become. And if the road was long and uncertain, at least they traveled it together. Two souls who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light. The courthouse in Prescott stood like a monument to justice, its white columns gleaming in the morning sun. Clara adjusted her black dress, not widow's weeds this time, but the respectable attire of a woman ready to speak truth to power. Beside her, Jesse wore his best suit, uncomfortable in its formality but understanding its necessity. "State your name for the record," the federal prosecutor said. "Clara Whitmore." Her voice carried clear across the packed courtroom. Half of Frontier's Hollow seemed to have made the journey. Some to support, most to gawk at the woman who'd brought down their town's most powerful men. The trial had been moved to Prescott for safety. Too many interested parties in the territorial capital, even here. Jesse kept his hand near his gun, watching the crowd for familiar faces that might mean trouble. "Mrs. Whitmore, please tell the court about the night of September 15th, 1879. Clara's hands were steady on the rail of the witness box. "That was the night my husband, Benjamin Whitmore, participated in the murder of Samuel Kane." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor raised his hand for silence. "You were present." "No, but Benjamin came home that night with blood on his clothes and more money than he'd left with. He was drunk, boasting about teaching some young card-sharp a lesson." Clara's eyes found Jesse in the gallery. "He said Sheriff Cobb had made sure the boy wouldn't be cheating anyone else?" "Objection." The defense attorney, a slick man from Denver, was on his feet. "Hearsay. The alleged victim's husband is dead and cannot defend himself." "Your Honor." The prosecutor responded. "Mrs. Whitmore's testimony goes to establishing a pattern of corruption that—" "I'll allow it," Judge Harrison said. He was an older man, brought in specially from the federal circuit. "Continue, Mrs. Whitmore." Clara told it all. Benjamin's dealings with Sheriff Cobb, the bribes paid and received, the property stolen through forged documents. She spoke of ledgers hidden beneath floorboards, of midnight meetings, of good people driven from their homes by men who thought the law was their personal tool. "And where are these ledgers now?" the prosecutor asked. "I retrieved them before leaving Frontier's Hollow." Clara produced a wrapped bundle from beside her chair, along with correspondence between Benjamin, Sheriff Watson, Mr. Hartwell from the bank, and others. The defense attorney tried to shake her during cross-examination, painting her as a bitter widow seeking revenge, a fallen woman who'd taken up with a known gunslinger. But Clara met each accusation with calm truth. "Yes, I traveled with Jesse Kane. He saved my life when no one else would lift a finger. Yes, I know he's killed men who were trying to kill him first." She lifted her chin. "If protecting myself and seeking justice for an innocent boy's death makes me fallen, then I'll gladly fall 1,000 times more." Jesse testified next, his account of searching for his brother's killers matching Clara's evidence point by point. When he produced Will Tanner's confession, several defendants visibly paled. The trial stretched across 3 days. Witnesses were called Dr. Finch, miraculous alive despite the attempt on his life. Several townspeople who'd found courage in Clara and Jesse's example. Even Mrs. Henderson took the stand, admitting she'd seen Sheriff Watson burning documents the night Jesse and Clara fled town, on the 3rd evening, while the jury deliberated. Jesse found Clara standing outside the courthouse, watching the sunset paint the mountains crimson. "It's almost over," he said. "Is it?" She leaned against him, something she wouldn't have done even a month ago. "Watson's cousin is still out there. The men who shot Marshal Bedford, all the others who profited from the corruption. One fight at a time." Jesse wrapped an arm around her. "We've done what we came to do. Sam's death won't go unpunished. And after, when the verdicts come in, then we live. Remember that ranch in Montana Marcus told us about?" Clara smiled. "I remember. Do you really think we can do it? Be normal people with normal lives? I think we can be whatever we choose to be. That's the gift of starting over." The jury returned at dawn. Guilty verdicts rang out like church bells. Watson for corruption and conspiracy. Hartwell's estate liable for fraud. A dozen others for crimes ranging from bribery to murder. Not everyone would hang, but the power structure that had crushed Frontier's Hollow for years was broken. As they left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, someone called Clara's name. She turned to see a young woman with a baby in her arms, Maria Sanchez, whose son Clara had tended. "I wanted to thank you," Maria said in accented English, "for everything. You gave us hope when there was none." Clara touched the baby's cheek gently. "Take care of your family, Maria. That's all any of us can do." They were preparing to leave Prescott when trouble finally caught up. Jesse had gone to settle their hotel bill while Clara packed. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, or thought she did. The door opened, but it wasn't Jesse who entered. Luther Cross stood there, thinner than before, his eyes burning with fermented hatred. He had a gun in his hand and whiskey on his breath. "Hello, Clara." His voice was conversationally mad. "Been looking for you." Clara's hand inched toward the derringer in her pocket. "Jesse's parting gift. Luther, I heard you'd left the territory. Came back for the trial. Wanted to see the woman who ruined everything." He moved into the room, kicking the door shut behind him. "You know Watson was my cousin? My blood. Now he's going to hang because of you. Watson's going to hang because he broke the law." "The law?" Luther spat. "Your dead husband's law. Your gunslinger's law. What about my law?" He raised the gun, and Clara saw her death in his eyes, but she also saw his hand shaking. The telltale tremor of a drunk. She dove sideways as he fired, the bullet splintering the bedpost where she'd been standing. Her derringer was in her hand before Luther could cock his pistol again. She fired once, the small gun bucking in her grip. Luther looked surprised as the red stain spread across his shirt. The gun fell from his fingers. "You!" He dropped to his knees. "You were supposed to be weak, supposed to be afraid. I was..." Clara kept the derringer trained on him. "For years, I was, but not anymore." Luther fell forward, his breathing becoming wet and labored. By the time Jesse burst through the door, gun drawn, it was over. The local sheriff, a decent man named Thompson, took Clara's statement without judgment. Self-defense, clear and simple. Luther Cross was buried in a pauper's grave, unmourned and unmarked. "How do you feel?" Jesse asked that night as their stagecoach rolled north. Clara considered the question seriously. "I thought I'd feel guilty, or triumphant, but mostly I just feel... free? Is that wrong?" "No, that's survival." Jesse took her hand. "You did what you had to do, no more, no less." They traveled in stages, stagecoach to Denver, train to Cheyenne, then horseback into the vastness of Montana territory. The landscape changed from desert to mountain to endless grassland, each mile taking them further from their past. Tom Morrison's ranch sat in a valley between two mountain ranges, a sprawling operation that ran cattle and horses across thousands of acres. Morrison himself was a gruff Scotsman with kind eyes and work-scarred hands. "So, you're the pair Marcus wrote about?" he said, sizing them up. "The widow and the gunfighter who took on a whole town. We're just looking for honest work," Jesse said. Morrison grinned. "Honest work I've got plenty of. Can you rope?" "Yes." "Break horses?" "Yes." "Keep your mouth shut and your nose out of other folks' business?" "Definitely. Then you'll do fine. The missus will be glad for another woman around the place. Gets lonely out here." They settled into ranch life with surprising ease. Jesse's skill with horses made him valuable, while Clara's education, she could read, write, and figure better than most, soon had her helping with the ranch's accounts. Mrs. Morrison, a cheerful woman named Elizabeth, welcomed Clara like a daughter. But the past wasn't done with them yet. 2 months into their new life, Jesse was breaking a particularly stubborn Mustang when he noticed riders approaching. His hand went instinctively to his gun before recognizing Tom Morrison among them. "Jesse," Morrison called. "These men are looking for you." Jesse's blood went cold until he saw Morrison's relaxed posture. These weren't hunters. The lead rider dismounted, a tall man with a federal marshal's badge. "Mr. Kane? I'm Marshal Robert Dane. I have something for you from Judge Harrison." Jesse took the offered envelope warily. Inside was a document that made his hands tremble. A full presidential pardon, signed and sealed. Not just for past crimes, but a complete restoration of his rights as a citizen. "The judge was impressed by your testimony," Dane explained, "and by the service you provided in exposing the corruption. President Hayes himself signed this. And Clara, Mrs. Whitmore's pardon is already on file. Has been since the trial ended." Dane smiled. "You're both free and clear. Thought you'd want the paperwork to prove it." After the marshals left, Jesse found Clara in the garden she'd started behind their small cabin. She was kneeling in the dirt, planting seeds for spring vegetables, humming softly to herself. "We're officially not outlaws anymore," he said, showing her the pardon. Clara read it slowly, then looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "It's really over. Really over." She stood, not caring about the dirt on her hands, and threw her arms around him. They stayed that way for a long moment, holding each other in the fading light. "Jesse," Clara said against his chest, "there's something I need to tell you." He pulled back to look at her, concerned by her serious tone, but she was smiling, a secret, wondering smile. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, precious as gold dust. Jesse's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat belly. "Are you sure? Elizabeth helped me figure it out. All the signs are there." She covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Jesse laughed, the sound cracking with emotion. "Clara, I don't have words. Good thing I do, then." She pulled him down for a kiss. "I love you, Jesse Kane, past, present, and future. And I love you, both of you." They stood in their garden as the sun set behind the mountains. Two people who'd found each other in violence and learned to build something gentle. The past would always be with them, in scars and memories and the occasional nightmare, but it no longer defined them. That night, there was a barn dance at the Morrison Ranch. Jesse led Clara onto the floor, no longer caring who watched. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pinned up with wildflowers, more beautiful than she'd ever been in silk and jewels. They danced to fiddle music under stars and lanterns, surrounded by their new community. No one here cared about their history. They were just Jesse and Clara, the horse trainer and the bookkeeper, expecting their first child come spring. "Any regrets?" Clara asked as they swayed together. Jesse thought of his brother, properly avenged at last, of the blood on his hands, balanced now by the lives they'd saved through their testimony, of the woman in his arms who'd walked through hell and emerged whole. "Just one," he said. Clara's brow furrowed. "What's that?" "That it took so long to dance with you properly. With music and everything? She laughed, the sound bright as mountain water. Better late than never. Cowboy. They danced until the music stopped, until the lanterns burned low, until even the stars seemed to bow to their happiness. Two souls who'd been lost, now found. Two hearts who'd been broken, now healed. And in Clara's womb, new life grew, a future neither had dared dream of, conceived in love rather than fear, hope rather than desperation. Their child would know nothing of Frontier's Hollow, of wanted posters and midnight flights, only the mountains and grasslands of Montana, and parents who'd fought through darkness to give them light. Snow fell softly on the Montana mountains, blanketing the world in pristine white. A year had passed since Jesse and Clara arrived at the Morrison Ranch. A year that had transformed them from haunted fugitives into something they'd never imagined being ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Their cabin sat nestled against a grove of pines, smoke curling from the chimney into the gray morning sky. It was small but solid, built with Jesse's hands and filled with Clara's touches. Curtains at the windows, herbs drying from the rafters, books on handmade shelves. Inside, Clara sat by the fire, nursing their daughter. Sarah Kane had arrived with the spring flowers, screaming and perfect, with her father's green eyes and her mother's fierce spirit. Now, at 6 months old, she was the center of their world. Jesse entered, stamping snow from his boots, his arms full of firewood. He paused at the threshold, as he often did, to marvel at the scene before him. His wife, his child, his home, things he'd never dared dream of during those long years of running. "She's almost asleep," Clara whispered, smiling at him over Sarah's downy head. He set the wood down quietly and moved to sit beside them, his arm going around Clara's shoulders. Together they watched their daughter's eyes flutter closed, her tiny hand clutching Clara's finger even in sleep. Tom Morrison asked if we're coming to the Christmas dance. Jesse said softly, "Of course we are. I've been practicing my pie recipe for weeks." Clara shifted Sarah to her shoulder, patting her back gently. "Besides, you promised to dance with me in front of people. Remember? I dance with you every week at the Saturday socials, and I never get tired of it." She leaned into him. Who would have thought Jesse Kane would become the most requested dance partner in the valley? Only by you. Liar. I saw young Emma Baker making eyes at you last week. Jesse chuckled. She's 17 and thinks any man who can break horses is romantic. She'll grow out of it. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crackle and Sarah's soft breathing. Outside, the snow continued to fall, insulating them from the wider world. But even in this peace, echoes of the past sometimes surfaced. "I got a letter yesterday," Clara said eventually. "From Prescott." Jesse tensed slightly. Letters from their former life were rare and rarely good. "What did it say?" "Judge Harrison wrote, the last of the appeals failed. Watson was hanged last month." She paused. "He wanted us to know it was finished. Really finished." Jesse absorbed this news, waiting to feel something, satisfaction, perhaps, or closure, but there was only a distant sadness for wasted lives and choices that led to the gallows. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Like it happened to different people in a different lifetime." Clara stood carefully, carrying Sarah to her cradle. "We're not those people anymore, are we?" "No," Jesse agreed. "We're not." A knock at the door interrupted them. Jesse's hand moved instinctively toward the gun he no longer wore before remembering where they were. When he opened the door, Tom Morrison stood there with another man, older, well-dressed despite the weather. "Jesse, Clara," Tom said, entering with a stranger. "This is Mr. William Hartman from Helena. He has a proposition for you." Hartman was a banker, but unlike the corrupt Hartwell of Frontier's Hollow, he had honest eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work before prosperity. "I'll get to the point," Hartman said after accepting coffee. "I've heard about your skills with numbers, Mrs. Kane and Mr. Kane. Your reputation with horses has spread throughout the territory. I'm opening a new bank in Billings, and I need trustworthy people." Clara and Jesse exchanged glances. "What exactly are you proposing?" Clara asked. "I want you to manage the bank's books, Mrs. Kane and Mr. Kane. I'm investing in a freight company that needs someone who understands horses and men in equal measure." Hartman leaned forward. "I know your history. Frankly, it's why I trust you. You've been tested in ways most haven't and proved your integrity." "That's a generous offer," Jesse said carefully. "But we're happy here. I'm not asking you to leave immediately. The bank won't be ready for 6 months. Think about it." Hartman stood. "Billings is growing. It needs good people to grow right. People who understand that prosperity built on honest foundations lasts longer than that built on lies." After the men left, Clara and Jesse stood together at their window, watching the snow fall on their small domain. "It would be a chance to build something bigger," Clara said. "Sarah could go to a real school, have opportunities we didn't. Is that what you want?" Clara turned to face him. "I want what's best for our family. But Jesse, I need you to understand something. I'm not the scared widow who needed saving anymore. Whatever we decide together." "I know that." He pulled her close. "You saved yourself. Hell, you saved me. I'm just along for the ride now." She laughed, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Then what do you say, cowboy? Ready for another adventure? With you, always." They made the decision over the next weeks, talking through long winter nights while Sarah slept between them. In the end, it was the thought of building something lasting, something their daughter could be proud of, that decided them. Spring found them in Billings, a raw town transforming into a city. Their new house was larger than the cabin, with real glass windows and a parlor for entertaining. Jesse threw himself into the freight business with the same intensity he'd once pursued justice, while Clara brought order to the bank's chaotic books. They were respected now, their past forgotten or forgiven in the face of their obvious integrity. Clara joined the Ladies' Auxiliary, Jesse the town council. They were building the kind of community they'd once been excluded from, but with hard-won wisdom about the importance of justice and inclusion. One evening, as Clara worked on the bank ledgers at home, Jesse played with Sarah on the rug. Their daughter was walking now, toddling between pieces of furniture with determination that reminded him painfully of Samuel at that age. "Papa," Sarah demanded, holding up a wooden horse Jesse had carved for her. "Horse. That's right, little one, horse." He swept her up, making her giggle. "Someday Papa will teach you to ride a real one." "Not too soon," Clara said without looking up from her figures. "Let me pretend she's still a baby a little longer." A knock interrupted their domestic scene. Jesse answered to find a young woman, travel-worn and nervous, clutching a worn envelope. "Mr. Kane, my name is Margaret Sullivan. I need help." Something in her desperation was familiar. Jesse invited her in, noting Clara's assessing gaze as she set aside her work. Margaret's story tumbled out, a husband killed by claim jumpers, local law that looked the other way, a mining claim that was rightfully hers being stolen piece by piece. It was Frontier's Hollow all over again, just with different faces. "Why come to us?" Clara asked gently. "Because everyone knows your story, how you stood up to corruption and won, how you help people who can't help themselves." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have anywhere else to turn." Jesse and Clara shared a long look, entire conversations in a glance. They'd built this peaceful life, this respectable existence. Getting involved would risk everything they'd worked for. But Sarah chose that moment to toddle over to Margaret, offering her the wooden horse with the generous innocence of childhood. The young woman took it with trembling hands, managing a watery smile. "We'll look into it," Clara said. "Decision made. No promises, but we'll look into it." That night, as they prepared for bed, Jesse asked, "Are we really doing this again?" "Not the same thing," Clara said, brushing out her hair. "We're not running or fighting for our lives. We're just helping, using what we learned to make things better. You know, it could get complicated. Life is complicated. She set down her brush and came to him. But we can't pretend we don't see injustice just because we're comfortable now. That's how Frontier's Hollow got the way it was. Good people looking away. Jesse pulled her close. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between that first dance by Firelight and now. She rested her head on his chest. We've been given a second chance. Jesse, not everyone gets that. Don't we owe it to them, to Samuel, to Marshall Bedford, to everyone who didn't make it, to use it well? He pressed a kiss to her hair. You're right, as usual. I learned from the best. They took on Margaret's case, using their connections and hard-won knowledge to expose the corruption. It wasn't easy. There were threats, attempts at bribery, moments when their new respectable life trembled on the edge. But they persevered, and justice prevailed. Word spread. Others came seeking help. A widow being cheated by a dishonest lawyer. A family driven off their homestead by false claims. Workers being exploited by mine owners. Jesse and Clara couldn't help everyone, but they did what they could, building a network of honest lawyers, journalists and lawmen who shared their commitment to justice. Years passed. Sarah grew tall and strong, joined by a brother, Samuel, and a sister, Rose. The Kane family became a fixture in Billings society, known for their integrity and their willingness to stand up for what was right. On their 10th anniversary, Jesse surprised Clara with a trip back to their cabin on the Morrison Ranch, now used as a hunting lodge. They left the children with Elizabeth Morrison and spent a week alone in the place where their new life had truly begun. One evening, they built a fire outside, just as they had so many years ago at the old Jameson stable. The stars wheeled overhead, unchanged by the passage of time. Do you ever miss it? Clara asked. The simplicity of those early days? Sometimes, Jesse admitted. Life was harder but clearer. Survive, find justice, protect each other. Now there's committees and social obligations and 3 children who think their parents can fix every problem in the world. Clara laughed. We did rather set that precedent, didn't we? No regrets? Never about the big things. She moved into his arms. Though I do occasionally regret teaching Sarah to shoot. She's far too good at it for my peace of mind. She's her mother's daughter. And her father's. That combination terrifies me sometimes. They danced slowly by the firelight. No music but the wind in the pines and the distant call of an owl. Clara was no longer the broken widow. Jesse no longer the vengeful gunslinger. They had become something neither had imagined. Pillars of their community. Voices for justice. Parents raising children who would never know the fear and desperation that had shaped their early lives. I love you, Clara said against his chest. More than that first day, more than yesterday, probably less than tomorrow. Poetry now? Jesse teased. What happened to my practical banker wife? She discovered that numbers are just another kind of poetry, ledgers that balance, accounts that grow, families that prosper. It's all about finding the rhythm. She looked up at him. Besides, you turned a gunfighter into a freight company executive who reads bedtime stories. We've both changed. For the better. Definitely for the better. They stayed another hour by the fire, talking about their children, their work, the future they were building not just for themselves, but for their community. When they finally went inside, Clara paused at the door, looking back at the dying embers. You know what I realized? She said. We're not the widow and the wanted cowboy anymore. Haven't been for years. We're just Jesse and Clara now. Just Jesse and Clara, he repeated, pulling her inside. I like the sound of that. As they prepared for bed in the cabin where their daughter had been conceived, where they'd first dared to dream of a normal life, Clara felt a deep contentment settle over her. They'd walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. They'd found love in the ashes of loss, built hope from the rubble of despair. Tomorrow they would return to Billings, to their children and responsibilities and the endless work of building a just society. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But tonight, in this simple cabin where their journey toward each other had truly begun, they were complete. Jesse? Clara said in the darkness. Thank you. For what? For taking my hand that night by the fire, for teaching me to dance again, for showing me that surviving wasn't enough, that I deserved to live. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You showed me the same thing. Guess that makes us even. I love you, Jesse Kane. And I love you, Clara Kane, forever and then some. Outside, snow began to fall again, softly blanketing the world in peace. Inside, two souls who had found each other in darkness rested in the light they'd built together. Their love a testament to the power of second chances and the courage to dance when the whole world is watching. The widow had refused to dance until the wanted cowboy took her hand in the firelight. Now, she danced every day, with joy, with purpose, with the knowledge that the best adventures aren't always about running from something, but about having the courage to run toward the life you've always deserved. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Take the hand that's offered, trust in the dance, and believe that love is stronger than fear, hope mightier than despair, and that even the darkest night must yield to dawn. Thank you all for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more stories that capture the spirit of the American frontier. What did you think of Clara and Jesse's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what touched your heart in their story.